I arrived at my mother's house on June 22nd, close to evening, when the sun was already sinking behind the pines and the whole town in Oregon was starting to look like an old photograph someone had left too long in a damp basement. My mother's name was Irene Holloway. She was 78. She was dying of bone cancer in St. Agnes Hospice, 40 minutes from the house where I grew up and hadn't returned to in almost 6 years. My name is Michael Holloway. I'm 42. I work as an archivist. That means I've spent my entire life learning to trust paper more than people. That's why I didn't believe the first notebook, then the second, then the 10th, then the 37th. My mother's house was too clean for someone who was dying. There were no dirty dishes in the kitchen. Napkins were folded into triangles on the table. In the living room, the clock ticked so loudly it felt like it was trying to prove that time still worked here. I went into the bedroom last. It smelled of lavender, dust, and medicine. The bed was perfectly made. The pillow sat exactly in the center. On the nightstand was a glass of water, dried inside with a white ring. Next to it, my mother's glasses, an old prayer book, and a photograph of me as a child. I picked up the frame. I was about 5 in the picture, sitting on the porch, clutching a toy truck, looking somewhere past the camera. Not at the lens, not at my mother, somewhere beyond. On the back of the frame, in her handwriting, it said, "He already sees." I put the frame back. At the time, I didn't understand why my teeth had suddenly gone cold. I bent down to check under the bed. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. If someone has lived in a house for 40 years, the most important things are rarely on the surface. There were boxes under the bed, 4 long plastic containers. Each lid had a sticker. Michael Dreams, 1984 to 1993. Michael Dreams, 1994 to 2001. Michael Dreams, 2002 to 2015. After the silence, I pulled out the first container. Inside were notebooks, cheap school notebooks with soft covers, all numbered, number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on. I opened the first one. The first page was dated March 7th, 1984. I was 2 years old. Michael dreamed of a yellow truck. He woke at 3:12 and cried, repeated, "The boy isn't breathing. The yellow truck is carrying a boy who isn't breathing. We'll check the news tomorrow." I turned the page. March 8th, 1984. On 84th Street, a yellow pickup hit a child. The boy died before the ambulance arrived. Michael was silent all day, refused to play with toy trucks. I closed the notebook, then opened it again. A strange, unpleasant feeling spread through my chest, as if someone had placed a finger against the inside of my rib and tapped lightly. Not painful, just reminding. I picked up another notebook. November 19th, 1987. Michael dreamed of a woman in a green coat. He repeated, "She will fall where the water is black." November 20th. A woman was found in the Willamette River. She was wearing a green coat. Next, May 4th, 1990, Michael saw a house with a red door. Inside, a boy held matches. The next day, a fire in Salem. 1 fatality. Next, January 12th, 1992, Michael woke up with his teeth chattering. Repeated, "Dad will leave, but he won't die. He will just forget our voices." 3 days later, David packed his things. I stopped breathing. David was my father. He really did leave in January 1992, alive, healthy, to Florida. And in 20 years, he called me twice. I sat down on the bedroom floor. The notebooks lay around me like small gravestones. My mother's handwriting was the same everywhere, even, patient, no emotion, just dates, time, the description of the dream, and what happened after. Death, death, death. Hundreds of deaths recorded as if my mother were keeping a ledger. I opened the last container. After the silence. Inside was only one notebook, number 37. The cover was new, almost clean. The date on the first page, April 9th, 2025, 2 weeks ago. Today, Michael had a dream. He sat in the chair beside me and stared into the corner of the room, though he wasn't asleep. His mouth moved on its own. He said, "Mom, they will come for me on June 23rd. I don't want to see them, but the bones agree. The bones always agree." Then he opened his eyes and remembered nothing. But I remembered. I always remember. I read the page 3 times. Then I looked at the date on my phone. June 22, 8:46 p.m. The house around me was quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, I heard the first knock. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. I stood up. The sound wasn't coming from the wall, not from the floor, not from outside. It was coming from the box of notebooks. I pulled all the notebooks into the middle of the room. The knocking grew louder. Knock, 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 as if something inside each notebook was bending tiny fingers. I grabbed notebook number 37, my car keys, and ran out of the house. Cold air hit me on the porch, and that's when I realized something else. The knocking hadn't stayed in the house. It was inside me, in my teeth, in my jaw, in the bones of my face. Quiet, rhythmic, agreeing. It was a 40-minute drive to St. Agnes Hospice along an old road through the forest and over a small bridge that crossed a dried-up riverbed. When I was a kid, there used to be water under that bridge. In the summer, my father and I would climb down there and catch frogs in an old peanut butter jar. My mother didn't like it when we went near the river.
Bones hear better underwater.
As a child, I thought she was just trying to scare me so I wouldn't climb on the slippery rocks. Now, I wasn't so sure. The car stalled right on the bridge. No jolt, no warning. It just died. The headlights stayed on. The radio went silent. The engine stopped. I turned the key. Nothing. Again, just a dry click. I slammed my palm against the steering wheel. No, not now. The answer was a knock. At first, quiet, then clearer. Not from the engine, from below. I opened the door and stepped out. The air above the bridge was colder than it should have been in June. Below lay the dry riverbed, stones, dirt, gray roots, plastic bottles caught in the grass. And 3 figures. They were moving along the bottom of the riverbed. No, not walking, gliding. Their feet didn't touch the ground. They were tall and narrow, like people left too long in the sun. No clothes, no skin, no faces. Only bones, arranged in the shape of a human, not skeletons, a shape. The bones were not where they should be. Ribs jutted from shoulders. Fingers formed crowns around empty heads. Spines wrapped along arms like bracelets. Jaws hung from rib cages, softly knocking against each other, like castanets. One of the figures lifted its head, even though it didn't have one. I felt its gaze in the roots of my teeth. My mouth filled with the taste of chalk. I blinked. The figures were gone, but the knocking remained. Now it wasn't under the bridge. It was inside my skull. I stepped back toward the car. The door hit my thigh. I got behind the wheel, turned the key. The engine started immediately. The radio turned on by itself. First static, then a child's voice.
Dad?
I froze. My son Caleb was 9. This weekend he was supposed to be with my ex-wife, Rachel, in Portland. Caleb? The radio crackled.
Don't sleep tonight.
Where are you?
Grandma records better when it's dark.
The radio clicked. The normal local station came back. A man was cheerfully talking about baseball, traffic, and the weekend weather. I called Rachel. Voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I kept driving. My hands slipped on the steering wheel. Every time my teeth touched, I heard the knock. St. Agnes Hospice stood on a hill outside the town. A low white building with large windows, a neat lawn, and a flag that barely moved in the still air. At the entrance, it smelled of wet flowers and disinfectant. Inside, coffee, plastic, old age, and waiting. A nurse with a tired face sat at the desk.
Mr. Holloway?
Yes, I'm here for Irene Holloway.
Room 12. She's been restless today.
What does restless mean?
Crying. Every night. At the same time.
What time?
3:15.
I felt notebook number 37 grow heavier under my jacket.
Dr. Price wanted to speak with you when you arrived.
My mother first.
She barely speaks. Morphine.
I'm not sure I need her to speak. The nurse looked at me like she had heard that before from people who later regretted it. Room 12 was at the end of the hallway. There was an IV stand by the door with a clear bag of fluid. Inside, a lamp cast a soft yellowed light. My mother lay on the bed. She had become small, not just thin, small, as if the disease wasn't taking her body, but her years. Her skin was almost transparent. Beneath it, bones pressed through, wrong, sharp, as if someone had tried to assemble her again without knowing what a human should look like. She turned her head, saw me, and began to cry. Silently, tears ran toward her ears. I sat beside her, took out the notebook, placed it on the blanket. What is this? My mother stared at the notebook. Her lips trembled. You recorded my dreams for 40 years? She closed her eyes. They came true? Her fingers slowly moved across the blanket, toward me. I gave her my hand. She gripped my index finger, weakly. Then, with her nail, she began to scratch my palm. At first, I didn't understand. Then I made out the letters. N, O, space, S, L, E, E, P. Don't sleep. I stared at the red marks on my skin. Why? My mother opened her eyes. Her pupils were dark, alive, afraid. She started scratching again. D, O, N, O, T, R, E, M, E, M, B, E, R. Don't remember. Then her hand fell. The machine beside the bed kept clicking softly, and something in the wall behind her head answered. At 3:15, I was sitting beside my mother's bed, staring at the clock. I wasn't asleep. I was afraid to even blink for too long. The hospice hallway was almost empty. Sometimes a nurse passed. Somewhere far off, a television murmured. Someone coughed behind a wall. At 3:14, my mother lay completely still. At 3:15, Her eyes opened, and tears immediately began to run toward her temples. I leaned closer. "Mom." She didn't look at me. She was staring at the ceiling. At 3:16, the knocking began in the far end of the building. Quiet, dry, as if someone were testing the walls with their knuckles. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. It moved down the corridor, room by room. At the door of room 9, it grew louder. At room 10, lower. At room 11, almost inside my ear. Then it stopped at our door. My mother gasped sharply, her back arching. I grabbed the call button for the nurse. She turned her head toward me. Her pupils became white. Not cloudy, not rolled back, white like milk. And the voice that came from her mouth was not her voice. It was younger, deeper, coming from several places at once.
Did you carry me for 9 months?
I recoiled.
No, she carried you, and I carried your dreams for 40 years.
Who's speaking?
You closed the door, boy.
What door?
The third one. Silence. You chose it and thought you were free.
I don't understand.
Now you carry the bones. Do they agree?
Agree to what?
To you?
The monitor beside the bed began to beep. I ran into the hallway. Dr. Lena Price stood near the nurse's station as if she had been waiting for me. She was around 50, gray at the temples, dark circles under her eyes, a spotless white coat. In her hands, she held a folder.
You heard the knocking.
I need you to reduce my mother's morphine.
It's not morphine.
Then what is it?
I've been observing this for 15 years.
Observing what?
Patients with bone metastases hear knocking before death. Not all of them, only some. Usually at night, usually between 3 and 3:30. They say someone is counting.
Hallucinations?
That's what I thought too.
She opened the folder. Inside were photographs, a hospital wall, a scratched drawing. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my brain assembled the lines. It was an X-ray, a human skeleton, but the bones were arranged incorrectly. They formed a symbol, something that spiraled and broke into 3 branches.
The patient had never seen his own scan. He was unconscious most of the time. But one night, he sat up, took a piece of a metal spoon, and carved this into the wall.
What is it?
The symbol appears in every case where they hear the knocking.
Every case?
43 in 15 years.
I remembered the notebook, June 23, the bones agree. My mother kept journals about my dreams. The dreams came true. People died. She didn't look surprised. That made it worse.
Irene talked about you often,
What did she say?
that you were a good vessel.
I'm not a vessel.
To her, you were.
What does the bones agree mean?
I found only one reference in the county archives, a missionary's translation, very poor, very old.
What did it say?
When memory becomes too heavy for blood, the bones must decide who will be the home.
I laughed, quietly. Wrong. Do you hear how that sounds?
Yes.
My son called me through the radio. Her expression changed, for the first time during the entire conversation.
You have a child?
Caleb, 9 years old.
Did Irene see him?
Sometimes.
How often?
I didn't find the answer right away. Rachel worked weekends. My mother often offered to watch Caleb. I thought it was good that my son had a grandmother, that I was no longer the only bridge between generations. Almost every weekend, about a year, maybe longer. Dr. Price closed the folder.
Go to your son.
Why?
Because Irene never stopped recording.
But that's the last notebook.
For you.
I drove back to my mother's house. because I needed to understand what had happened in 1995. Dr. Price wanted to call the police. I refused, not out of courage, out of shame. How do you explain to the police that your dying mother had spent 40 years recording your dreams about death, and now your son might be next? The house greeted me with an open door. I was sure I had locked it. Inside, it smelled different. Not lavender, old earth, and rain that had never fallen. I turned on the light. The notebooks were not where I had left them. They had been arranged in a circle on the bedroom floor. In the center of the circle was a photograph of Caleb. He was 7 in it, smiling without his front teeth, holding a paper dinosaur. On the back, my mother had written, "He is not afraid of the third door." I picked up the notebook from 1995. My fingers were shaking. The pages opened by themselves somewhere near the middle. August 15th, 1995. I was 12. Michael dreamed of a room. In the room were 3 doors. Behind the first was his mother, but she had no skin. Behind the second was his father, but he spoke in a language that does not exist. Behind the third was silence. Michael cried and repeated, "I choose the silence." After that, the dream stopped. I didn't remember that dream, but I remembered that August. I remembered waking up one morning and, for the first time, feeling emptiness inside my head. Before that, my nights had not been dreams. They had been other people's deaths. I saw faces of people I didn't know. I saw the final seconds of their lives. I saw hospitals, roads, kitchens, forests, bathrooms, staircases, swimming pools. Sometimes I woke with the taste of blood in my mouth, sometimes with the smell of smoke in my hair. My mother was always sitting beside me, with a notebook.
Tell it exactly, Michael. Exactly means merciful.
I thought all children slept that way. Then the dreams disappeared and I became normal, or almost normal. I called my father. I hadn't called him in 3 years. He didn't answer right away.
Michael?
I need to talk about Mom.
Is she dead?
No.
Then we can still avoid talking.
She recorded my dreams. The other end went quiet. Not a pause. An emptiness. Did you know?
I knew what she was doing.
Why didn't you take me?
I tried.
No, you left.
Because she convinced the court I was unstable.
You drank.
Anyone would have after that house.
I sat on the edge of the bed. Was she recording my dreams or creating them? My father breathed into the phone for a long time.
She was teaching you to see.
What does that mean?
Every night at 3 in the morning, she sat by your bed and whispered into your ear names, places, images, deaths from newspapers, stories from archives. She called it tuning.
No.
Yes.
The dreams came true.
Some had already happened. Some she guessed. Some, I don't know, Michael. I saw enough to stop arguing with the impossible. But it didn't start with you. It started with her.
Why?
Her mother did the same thing to her.
I closed my eyes. The room became too small.
It wasn't a gift, and it wasn't a curse. It was a way of looking at the world. You were taught to notice death before life. A child believes what is whispered to him in the dark.
She chose Caleb.
What?
She watched him on weekends.
Michael.
What?
She always wanted a continuation.
The phone almost slipped from my hand.
When you stopped seeing dreams, she changed, empty, angry, like you had stolen her God. If she got to Caleb, you need to get him now.
He's with Rachel.
Check.
I hung up, called Rachel. Nothing. Called again. Nothing. Then a message came in from an unknown number. He is drawing the third door. I ran out of my mother's house. The drive to Portland took less than 2 hours, though I barely remembered driving. Several times I thought I saw people standing along the shoulder, tall, faceless. When my headlights touched them, they became road signs, mailboxes, trees. But the knocking never stopped. Caleb lived with Rachel in a small house on the edge of town. I pulled up around midnight. All the windows were dark. The door was unlocked. Rachel? Silence. Caleb? On the kitchen table were 2 neatly folded stacks of clothes. Rachel's clothes. Caleb's clothes. Folded as if people had stepped out of them and forgotten to come back. On the floor, a trail led to the basement door. I took a kitchen knife. My hand didn't want to hold it tightly. The basement door was slightly open. Light came from below, and the sound of pencil on paper. I went down. Caleb was sitting on the floor, alive, in his pajamas. Dozens of sheets lay in front of him. On each one was the same symbol. 3 branches. Around him stood 3 figures, bone figures, the same ones from under the bridge. Up close, they were worse. Between their bones was darkness, not emptiness, darkness itself, thick and soft like velvet. It filled the places where a person should have organs, a face, eyes. One figure turned toward me, its jaws opened. There was no knocking. It had stopped, and that made it worse.
Dad, you're early.
Come to me.
Grandma thought you'd come after 3:15.
Where's your mom?
She's sleeping upstairs.
Her clothes are there.
That isn't her. That's what she doesn't remember anymore.
I took a step. The figures didn't move. Caleb, get up.
You shouldn't be angry at Grandma.
Did she scare you?
No.
What did she do?
Taught me to listen.
To whom?
The bones.
One of the figures raised a hand and pointed at the clock on the wall, an old basement clock I had never seen before. Its hands showed 3:15, even though my phone said 12:23.
You're the first door.
What?
I'm the second.
Caleb.
The third will open tomorrow, when Grandma stops holding them alone.
Holding who?
Everyone you saw and forgot.
He lifted a sheet. The drawing wasn't a spiral. It was a city. Our city. Only the streets were made of bones. And beneath it, in a child's handwriting, was one word. Home. I grabbed Caleb and lifted him into my arms. He didn't fight me. Neither did the figures. They simply stood around the empty place where he had been sitting, like guests someone had forgotten to invite to the table. I ran up the stairs, expecting bone hands to grab my legs. Nothing. In the kitchen, Rachel's clothes still lay on the table. Then a quiet voice came from the bedroom upstairs.
Michael?
I froze. Caleb pressed himself against me. Rachel?
Why is it so dark?
I went upstairs. Rachel was sitting on the bed, in her clothes, alive, terrified. She was staring at her hands as if she didn't understand how they were attached to her.
I dreamed I was an empty shirt.
Get dressed. We're leaving.
What's happening?
Grandma is almost finished.
Rachel looked at him.
What does he mean?
I'll explain in the car. I didn't explain. Because in the car, the radio turned on by itself. Not music. Knocking. Rachel began to cry.
What is that?
They're counting how much is left.
Until what?
Until memory becomes a body.
Caleb, speak normally.
I am speaking normally. You just don't want to understand.
Michael, stop the car.
No.
Stop the car.
No.
They're not evil.
Who are they?
The ones no one walked out.
I looked at him through the mirror. What did Grandma teach you?
When a person dies and no one remembers them correctly, part of the death stays in the bones. The earth won't take it. Then the bones knock. They search for someone who will see the ending all the way to the end.
God.
Grandma remembered through you. You saw dreams, and the bones went away. Then you chose silence. Grandma started remembering by herself, but her bones got sick. There was too much inside them.
And she chose you?
She thought I could do it.
Can you? Caleb stared out the window for a long time.
I don't only see death.
Then what do you see?
What comes after if no one says goodbye?
The radio crackled. My mother's voice passed through the speakers, weak, dry.
Michael,
Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. Mom?
you have to come back.
No.
The bones have already chosen.
You're not coming near my son.
I never wanted harm.
You stole my childhood.
I gave you purpose.
That's not the same thing.
The boy won't survive it. He sees deeper than you. If the third door opens inside him, he'll be empty before he turns 10.
Caleb turned away from the window.
Grandma is afraid.
Yes,
My mother's voice broke.
I'm afraid.
For the first time in my entire life, she didn't sound like a woman who knew more than everyone else. She sounded like a child in a dark room.
I held them too long. I thought if I wrote everything down, they would leave. But recording is not goodbye. Recording is a cage. I made you into a cage, then myself, then almost him.
What do I have to do?
Remember.
I don't remember.
The bones remember for you.
What does the bones agree mean?
They agree to enter if you agree to open.
And if I don't?
Then they'll stay with the one who hears best.
I looked at Caleb. He was staring at his hands. His fingers were lightly tapping against his knees. I turned the car around. Rachel grabbed my shoulder.
You're taking us there?
I'm taking myself.
No!
Take Caleb at the entrance. Leave. Don't wake.
I have to be there.
No.
I'm the second door.
You're my son.
That's exactly why.
The hospice looked darker than before. There was no light in the windows, though the parking lot was full. Staff cars stood in rows. Not one engine was running. Not one person came out. When we pulled up, the entrance doors opened by themselves. Dr. Price was waiting in the lobby. In her hand, she held a flashlight.
The power went out at 3:15.
It's not 3:15.
It is always 3:15 here.
Behind her, the hallway was longer than it should have been. Room 12 was supposed to be at the end, but now the end was no longer visible. From every door came knocking, not loud, not chaotic, unified, like rain on a roof, like thousands of knuckles against wood. We walked together. Me, Caleb, Dr. Price. Rachel stayed by the entrance, but I could hear her crying. Drawings had appeared on the walls. Not paint, not blood, scratches, skeletons, 3 branches, and names, hundreds of names. Some of them I recognized. The yellow truck, the woman in the green coat, The house with the red door, the boy by the river, the old man on the stairs. Face after face, death after death. The ones I had seen in dreams, the ones I had forgotten. My mother's room was open. Irene was sitting on the bed, without help, without pillows. Her eyes were white, but the smile belonged to her.
You came back.
Not for you.
I know.
Caleb hid behind my arm. Irene looked at him.
Forgive me.
I'm not the one you should ask.
Irene nodded. Then she looked at me.
I made you into a library.
You made me into a child who was afraid to sleep.
Yes.
You knew it was breaking me.
Yes.
And you kept going.
Yes.
That was worse than excuses. Truth is always worse when it doesn't defend itself.
My mother did it to me. Her mother did it to her. We called it duty, then a gift, then mercy, but really it was fear. We were afraid that if we stopped remembering the dead, they would become us.
And did they?
Almost.
Irene, what happens on June 23rd?
What should have happened 40 years ago. The bones will find a home.
In me.
If you agree.
And if I don't? Irene looked at Caleb. I didn't need an answer. I sat down on the floor. Not because I wanted to. My legs simply stopped holding me. The knocking grew louder at once. It rose from the floor, from the walls, from the bed, from my body. Caleb sat beside me and took my hand.
Dad, when you see them, don't run.
See who?
Everyone.
I closed my eyes. At first, there was darkness. Then, the yellow truck. I was a 2-year-old child again. I stood on the sidewalk of 84th Street and watched a yellow pickup rolling too fast. A boy ran out after a ball. I wanted to scream. I had no voice. The impact wasn't loud. The most terrifying thing about death is that it often sounds ordinary. Tires, brakes, someone's bag falling onto the asphalt. Then I was in the river. The water was black. The woman in the green coat wasn't fighting. She was simply looking up at the light as it grew smaller. Then the red door. Smoke. A child with matches. Then the staircase. Then the bathroom. Then the hospital room. Then the bridge. Then a kitchen where a man clutched his chest and tried to reach the phone. I saw everything, not as a dream, as memory, my memory, and someone else's. Deaths entered me, not like knives, but like keys. Each one opened a small room my mother had locked inside me long ago. In every room, someone was waiting. Not evil, not frightening, tired. I remember. The knocking changed. It became softer. I remember the yellow truck. Knock. I remember the woman in the river. Knock. I remember the house with the red door. Knock. I remember the boy who wasn't breathing. Knock. I remember everyone I saw. The floor beneath me trembled. The bones in my body began to vibrate so violently that I thought they were about to come out. But there was no pain. There was weight. Enormous weight. 40 years of other people's final seconds. And beneath them, my own life, small, compressed, almost invisible. I saw my mother young. She was sitting by my bed at 3 in the morning, whispering newspaper headlines into my ear, holding a pencil, crying. I saw her as a girl, her mother sitting beside her, the same whisper, the same notebook, the same love ruined by fear. I saw Caleb. He was standing before the third door. The door wasn't made of wood, it was made of silence. I understood that if it opened, he would never be a child again. I squeezed his hand. Not him. The knocking stopped. Me. The silence became so complete that I could hear my own blood. Then millions of voices passed through me, not as words, as memories. Hands that held children, feet that ran through forests, voices, forgotten languages, names no one had spoken for hundreds of years. Workers buried without markers, soldiers who died far from home, children who fell into water, women whose stories became rumors, men who were found too late. None of them were monsters. They were what remained when the living chose not to remember. I cried, not beautifully, not quietly. I cried the way children cry when they finally understood that the pain was real. I remember. The room grew bright, not from the lamp, from somewhere inside the walls. My mother lay on the bed. Her eyes were dark again. She was looking at me.
Michael,
I'm here.
you were a good boy.
Don't.
I didn't know how to love without fear.
I know.
That is not an excuse.
No.
You're free.
I wanted to believe her, truly. In that moment, I almost did. She closed her eyes. Her face relaxed. For the first time in many years, she didn't look strict or frightened or hungry for someone else's memory. Just an old woman, very tired. The machine beside the bed gave one long sound, then silence. Not frightening, ordinary. Dr. Price checked her pulse.
She's gone.
Caleb pressed against me.
Dad, why are you crying?
Because I will never see another dream again.
Is that good?
I looked at my mother, at notebook number 37 beside her hand, at my fingers, still trembling. I don't know. A month later, we moved to Arizona. Not all of us together. Rachel didn't forgive me. I didn't blame her. But she allowed Caleb to visit me for the summer. Maybe because he asked her to. Maybe because after that night, she heard knocking in the walls too and didn't want to stay near that house. I got a job in a small county archive, a dry town, dusty streets, low sky, no rivers, no bridges, no pines. I slept 6 hours, then 7. There were no dreams, none at all, only darkness. And I loved it. Every night I closed my eyes and fell into emptiness without faces, without deaths, without voices. I thought that was freedom. On the last night of July, Caleb came into my bedroom. He was wearing dinosaur pajamas. He stood in the doorway and looked at me far too calmly. Caleb?
I dreamed about Grandma.
The room was dark, but moonlight lay across the floor like milk. What did she want?
She gave me a message.
What message?
The bones thank you.
I felt cold spread through my chest. Is that all? Caleb shook his head.
They left you a gift.
Where?
Under your tongue.
I didn't want to open my mouth, but my body already knew before I did. I lifted my tongue. There was something hard there, small, smooth. I went to the bathroom, turned on the light, and opened my mouth in front of the mirror. A tiny bone was sticking out beneath my tongue. Not a tooth, not a shard, a bone. White, foreign. I tried to pull it out with my fingers. It didn't move. I pulled harder. Pain flashed through my jaw, my throat, my spine. Caleb stood behind me. In the mirror, his face was pale.
Dad?
Then the knocking returned. Not from the walls, not from the floor, not from the town. From inside me, and my mother's voice whispered somewhere beneath my tongue.
You said, I remember.
I gripped the sink.
But you never said goodbye.
The bone beneath my tongue grew warmer.
Bones don't leave until you tell them goodbye.
I stared into the mirror and saw the darkness between the bones behind my own eyes.
Now you are their home.
Caleb began to cry. I wanted to turn toward him. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to say everything would be all right, but my mouth stretched into a smile on its own, not mine.
Welcome to the silence, son.
The knock sounded 3 times. Then Caleb screamed, and somewhere far away in the dry Arizona earth, the bones agreed.